Hi guys, Pete the Wargamer here, and welcome back to another episode of Straightforward Warhammer. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how you can quickly and easily paint the Skitarii miniatures, and as always, I'll be using the Citadel range of paints to do so. Before painting your miniatures, you first of all need to assemble them. However, instead of gluing the whole miniature together, I've instead left the arm holding the carbine and the backpack separate. I've also drilled small holes into the joints of these using a pin vise and superglued a section of wire to act as a holder. By keeping these sections separate, we will make painting some of the hard to reach areas such as the torso and the back of the Skitarii's robes much easier to paint. The extra time required to make the holders for these components will be saved when we are not having to battle to reach around them. After assembly, we need to prime, and this is where our first painting shortcut appears. By starting off with an aerosol applied base coat of the dominant colour, we save a lot of time over painting it with a brush. In the case of the Skitarii, there are a lot of metal areas on the model, so it makes sense to use a metallic paint, such as Leadbelcher, and conveniently, Games Workshop produces a Leadbelcher Spray paint. After priming, the first step in brush painting is to paint the robes of the miniature. I'll be tackling the iconic Mars colour scheme, so I'll be using Mephiston Red. As with all of the base coats that I'll be painting in this video, you'll want to mix this paint with some water in a mixture of roughly 1 part paint to 1 part water. With our paint thinned out, we now want to carefully paint the robes of our Skitarii. You may find that your first layer doesn't cover perfectly, but this is why we watered down our paint. After applying your first layer, allow the paint to dry before applying a second coat over the top. This layering technique will give you a nice and even finish without potentially obscuring details by applying the paint too thickly. After the robes have been completed, we can now paint on some of the details on the miniature with a base coat of Abaddon Black. These include the fabric on the legs, gloves, pipes and cables. Once again, ensure you create a watered down mixture of your paint and apply in several thin layers. The backpack of our Skitarii is covered in leather, and so we'll be painting it with a base coat of Steel Legion Drab, leaving the metallic details silver. Other areas that you could also paint with this colour include the parchment of any purity seals on the miniature, as well as any equipment pouches the Skitarii may have. If you're painting the ranger variants of the Skitarii, you could also paint the wooden stocks of their galvanic rifles with this paint as well. For the copper detailing on the weapon, helmet, backpack and torso, we want to use a base coat of Balthasar Gold. Take particular care when applying this paint not to overspill onto the non-metallic areas we painted in the previous 2 steps. Washes can be used as a very quick and easy way to add shading to the recesses of a miniature to really help make any details stand out. For this job, I'll be using Agrax Earthshade, and once again I'll be mixing in just a small amount of water to reduce the strength of the wash. I find that 2 parts wash to 1 part water will help to reduce the strength of the wash, giving you more control over its final result. With our wash mixed, we now want to apply it across the entire miniature. The reason we're using a brown wash instead of a black one such as non-oil is to give our Skitarii a slightly more dirty and worn effect. The brown will dull down the colour of the fabric and appear like grease and oil on the metallic sections. The watered down wash will allow us to control how strong the shading is, as well as giving you a much smoother finish than if you'd applied just one heavy layer. Just make sure that you allow the previous layer to dry thoroughly before applying subsequent layers. At this stage, our Skitarii will look fine when used on the tabletop, but if you wanted to improve the detail of your miniature, there are a couple of extra steps that you could apply. The first of these is a highlight to the wax of the purity seal using Pink Horror. The highlight is very simple to do and simply requires you to lightly paint the raised edges of the seal with a thin brush and a small amount of paint on the tip. This highlight will make the seal stand out against the red robe. Another small detail that can be added to your Skitarii is to paint any glowing lenses and vents using Baharroth Blue. The bright blue paint will really stand out against the darker reds and metallic colours and really help to bring out those details. Simply add a small dot of paint to the lenses and carefully paint the gaps between the coils on the radium carbine. Basing your Skitarii is made exceptionally easy by the use of Games Workshop's texture paints, particularly if you're looking to create a red oxide Martian landscape. For my own miniatures, I'm using Martion Ironearth for that parched and cracked ground, but you could also use Martian Ironcrust as well. Make sure that you apply a thick layer of the Ironearth to ensure that we can achieve the cracked effect. However, try not to spill over onto the painted miniature. After allowing your texture paint to dry, you should be left with either a cracked ground effect or a rocky texture. Whichever texture paint you applied, we can enhance our details using a wash of Agrax Earthshade. Apply this wash in much the same way as we did earlier. Once your wash has dried, we will now want to apply a dry brush of Lugganoth Orange. Dry brushing involves loading up a brush with some paint and removing some of the excess from it on a tissue or a piece of paper until only a small amount of paint remains in the bristles. Using our prepared dry brush, you now want to lightly drag the brush over the base's texture. This will cause the paint to accumulate on only the raised sections of the ground, which will help to improve its realism. In addition to dry brushing the base, you could also use the same technique to paint the bottom of the Skitarii's robe. When applied, the paint will give the effect of dust that is built up along the hem of the robe. The final step is to neaten up the lip of the base by painting it with a single colour. I personally use Abaddon Black, but many people use various browns. This will help to finish off the miniature by covering up any overspills that may have happened during painting. And here we have our finished Skitarii, who you can see I've fully assembled. And you can find a full list of all the paints that I've used in this video in the description below. Now, whilst I've only covered the Skitarii of Mars in this tutorial, with a couple of small changes, you can easily tackle other Forge Worlds as well. For Reza, paint the robes with Jaquero Orange and tackle the fabric on the legs using the Fang. For Agrippina, use Eshin Grey when painting the robes and Mephiston Red when painting the fabric of the legs. For Graia, paint their robes using the darker Khorne Red, and instead of black, paint the fabric using Mephiston Red. And finally, to recreate Metallica's white robes, base coat with Celestia Grey and wash over them using Nuln Oil instead. Finally, switch out the black legs for ones painted with Fenrisian Grey. So hopefully you should now have a better idea as to how this technique can be easily applied to other Forge World, as well as other miniatures of the Adeptus Mechanicus. And so that concludes another video of Straightforward Warhammer. If you enjoyed this video, please do let me know in the comments below, and also leave me your suggestions for other miniatures you would like to see me tackle quickly and easily in this format. If you're interested in supporting me and making more of these videos, you can do so by checking out my Patreon page, which you can find a link to in the description below. So the only thing left to say is thanks for watching, and goodbye.